Buongiorno. Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning everybody. Today we are here to talk about Afghanistan, to talk about in general about peace missions and the peace missions in which our soldiers are involved around the world. Our army has been involved in peace missions for 30 years now. And today we are here also to try to understand together what it means to work in the framework of a peace mission. This is a work that is often discussed. Politicians often discuss about peace missions even without knowing exactly what it means. Now we are here to talk about soldiers who are also human beings with their ideals, with their values, and with their stories, and who work in distant countries. And today we are here to talk about their experience, and we have the pleasure to have here with us some soldiers, some people who have been involved in peace missions, who have a long experience in this field. They know what it means to work for the army in peace missions abroad. And today we would like to understand what it means to be there. We're here to listen to their experience because we would like to understand how different it is from what we believe their daily life is. So the objective today is to try to understand what guides these people what drives these people to operate in peace missions and what their experience is like. So now I'd like to introduce our guests. First we have Giuseppe Amato, official of the Italian Army. Then we have Corporal Monica Contrafatto, next to me, to the left. We have General Luciano Portolano. And then we also have Mauro, Minister for Defense, who probably doesn't have a first-hand experience, but who clearly has a key responsibility. So first, I would like to give the floor to someone who has been involved in first person in a peace mission, in several peace missions, Giuseppe Amato, who wrote a book which is titled Echo dei miei passi a Kabul, the echo of my steps in Kabul. And well, Mr. Amato is going to talk about his experience in Afghanistan. He will explain us what the situation is like in Afghanistan. Actually, he's been there several times for several missions, so he knows how the situation evolved. First of all, I would like to say that this is my first experience here at the meeting of Rimini, and as I arrived yesterday, I felt alive. When I arrived here, I felt my heart vibrating, and this is the same feeling I have when I serve my country, even in difficult areas. And I also felt welcomed. Now, this is only the first time I'm here, and yet I felt as if I had been participating in the meeting for years and years, and so that is why I would like to thank you all for making me feel so welcome. Now, I would like to start with a question. Does it make sense for a soldier who was involved in peace missions abroad to publicly share his thoughts, his memories, his emotions, or maybe would it be better for him to keep them for himself among its most intimate things? Now, this is the very difficult question which I ask myself, and this is also the question which I would like to ask you. And my reply is that it does make sense for me to be here, because soldiers who have been involved in peace missions abroad come back home changed forever. Life is never as it was before. Now, my name is Giuseppe Amato. I'm an official of the Italian Army, and I had the honor to serve my country in several theaters, such as in Afghanistan. Now, according to a legend, Afghanistan seems to be a land abandoned by human beings, but also by God. And starting from my own personal experience, I will try to tell you my experience. I will tell you some episodes, some anecdotes, and I will try to explain you what brought me here to the meeting for friendship among peoples, to tell my story. And this is why I would like to thank the organizers of the meeting. I would like to thank the Minister Mauro. I would like to thank my superiors for giving me the opportunity to be here and to have the honor to share my experience here. So, to go back to my personal experience, I have to say that I was a bit confused and bewildered as I saw the passage from the suffocating summer heat, more than 45 degrees, to the freezing cold of Afghan winter, minus 30 degrees. Now, I performed several tasks in Afghanistan because I was involved in several missions. I had technical tasks, I had leadership tasks, and I had the opportunity to meet the local people, especially during my last missions in Afghanistan. And during my last mission, I dealt with politicians, I dealt with secretaries of Afghan ministers, I dealt with representatives of international organizations, and our goal was to elaborate projects in order to help Afghanistan rebuild and to overcome the permanent situation of crisis. And during my daily experience, I have to say it very sincerely, I had the opportunity, I was lucky enough to meet the ordinary people, people who have no titles and who are very rich and who give you who communicate some wealth. And as I came back from Afghanistan, I asked myself, Giuseppe, what have you brought back from Afghanistan? Now, I tried to summarize the answer to this question in the epilogue of my book, which was also published by a very important publishing company, and I would like to share with you the last sentence of my book. I brought back from Afghanistan the tears of a child crying for his kite, the eponym of Mr. Pizza, the footprint of naked feet on the ground, the pleasant smell of bread, a grain of sand soaked in blood, and the Calvary of Christ. Every soldier comes back home after a peace mission changed forever. And this occurs because what soldiers experience in these countries which are ravaged by decade-long wars is very little or nothing compared to what the local people have had to deal with for decades. And as I was in Afghanistan, the feeling of fear has always been with me every day. I also felt outrage for poverty, injustice, for abuse of power, for diseases and death. Very often I felt overwhelmed by a sense of powerlessness, as I was not able to do more in order to help the local people. And so I felt a number of feelings. I felt anguish for the fate of a collaborator of mine, an Afghan collaborator of mine who was the same age as myself and who disappeared after a meeting. I also felt excruciating pain for the tragic death of a 7-year-old child who was selling pretty much everything in the streets in order to scrape together some money to provide for his family. And as I saw him in the streets, I stopped there and I bought something in order for him to smile, to see him smile. I also saw what I defined as the sky crying as we paid our last respects to our comrades who died in a terrorist attack that was in September 2009. But I also brought back something else from Afghanistan. I brought back the enthusiasm of an Afghan boy who was happy for having received a job offer to work for an international organization as an interpreter. I also remember the uncontainable joy of someone who was going to vote for the first time and who thanked the international force, military force, for making this possible, for providing the conditions of security necessary for people to vote freely. I also brought back the sincere smile of children living in Afghanistan, children smiling every time I gave them a bottle of water, pens, or a new kite. I also brought back the experience of meeting the wise men of the villages, the so-called Magg. I also brought back the experience of the ritual of tea, so this sense of feeling welcomed. So even foreigners are welcomed in Afghanistan. I felt at home as I was in the houses of Afghan people and we were drinking tea together. I also brought back from Afghanistan the pleasure of kneading, baking and sharing the panja kask, which is the typical Afghan bread, which I baked together with 5 bakers. And so we kneaded together the bread, we baked it together, and as I was going out of the bakery, well, they invited me to eat the bread with them. And there is something else which gives me the thrills, and that is the face of a child I met by chance in a hospital. He was sitting on a wheelchair and he had a quilt which didn't hide his legs, but only because this child had lost his legs after jumping on a landmine. And so I gave him some chewing gums, and that gave him the opportunity to begin to talk with me, and he said that he was the faster in the village, but he was also sure that thanks to the treatments of the foreign soldiers, his legs would grow back, and that his legs would be stronger than before, and that it would be even faster than he was before losing his legs. So these are only some examples of what I have brought back from Afghanistan. Now, it is difficult to describe the number of feelings, experiences which you feel when you meet peoples who live under a different star from ours. And to go back to the initial question, is it appropriate for a soldier to share his experience? Well, my answer is yes. And I will now try to explain why I have come to this conclusion. Now, I am a pretty reserved person, and reservedness is especially important for a soldier. And as I came back from my last mission in Afghanistan, my wife, whom I'd like to thank, found my private journal. Now, every day I came back to the base, I wrote down my feelings, because I was almost afraid of forgetting what I had felt. And as I came back home, my wife discovered this private journal, and she read the journal, and she asked me to publicize it. And at first I didn't agree with her, because in this journal I described my own personal feelings, my experience, and for a soldier it is a bit embarrassing to show his feelings, but you know that women are very determined, and she had this objective and she wanted to achieve it. So I not only decided to publicize my experiences, my feelings, and my journal was published by an important publishing house. It became a book, and this was the beginning of an adventure which was totally unexpected to me, because as soon as the book came out, every week I was invited by several organizations to talk about Afghanistan. I was invited by counselors for culture. I was invited by schools, because the pupils need to learn about Afghanistan, to learn about the experience of soldiers, not from a technical point of view, but they want to learn about the personal experience of the soldiers. They want to know what we bring to these people and what we receive back from them. Now, I have to say that these missions are wonderful, and this is a wonderful mission because it helps me publicize the work of soldiers and to publicize the feeling of humanity which we Italians carry everywhere in the world, and which also helps discard the image, the often violent image of the Afghan world, which is only to a certain extent primitive, but which actually is characterized by very deep values. And I would also like to share my experience because it concerns us all as Italians, because it is in theaters, in peace missions, that the qualities of Italian soldiers clearly emerge. Italian soldiers are men and women who are ready to serve their country, and the work of these men and women has led to the creation of a term which can make us proud, and this term is the so-called Italian method. Now, what is the Italian method? It is the essence, the core of the culture, of the traditions which we as Italians, only Italians, can export everywhere, and we are appreciated for that, because it is that humanely Christian sense of life which allows us to gain the support, the friendship of foreign people, even when we are forced to move in their lands with armored vehicles, with helmets, with guns. This is the Italian method. It is something difficult to explain because it is something which we all have in our DNA as Italians, as we bear the Italian culture. And also these experiences concern us all as human beings, because contact with these people suffering from war, well, all this can help us rediscover the warmth, the simplicity, the authenticity, which is sometimes very different from what we have here in the West. And if we are here today, it is thanks to very enlightened people who believe that the experience, sharing the experience of soldiers abroad, can be a response to the emergency of Western man. It can be a response to the lack of ideals towards what doesn't glitter and what is not trendy. Now, what are the bases guiding the life of soldiers? Obedience, loyalty, spirit of self-sacrifice, fidelity, discipline, honor, care for the body, constant training, psychological resistance, empathy, support for the disadvantaged, support for the suffering. But the most beautiful value, I believe, is team spirit. Now, what is team spirit? This is something difficult to explain, but I will try to convey this concept to you. Now, between husband and wife, we talk about love. Between people who estimate each other, we talk about friendship. Now, between soldiers, we speak of a team spirit. This is what makes us feel united. We feel a sense of responsibility towards each other, and also to put our own lives in danger if we think we need to serve our comrade. Now, this team spirit makes us feel as a family, because we share values away from home. When we know that the only people on which you can count, with whom you can talk and share your most intimate feelings, is your comrade. And it is this team spirit which I believe could be a sort of ethical rebirth in a society which is governed by individualism. Now, all of these values are shared with unparalleled spirit of self-sacrifice by the wives, the girlfriends, by our children, and by all of us as Italians, because I'm convinced that each and every one of us is very proud of our soldiers serving our country abroad during peace missions, and honor the commitments taken by our state, by our nation. And sometimes, in order to meet these obligations and to honor our oath, we come back home in a casket wrapped up in the Italian flag. And to conclude my speech, I would like to quote a sentence which is sculpted on one of the columns of at the entrance of the Military Academy of Modena. And this sentence, I believe, can summarize the deepest sense of the life of a soldier, and which becomes even more valuable, in my opinion, every time I am called to serve my country, especially in a distant place. The sentence is the following: devouring tears in silence, donating blood and life. This is our law. God is in this law. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie davvero, Maggioni.
Thank you very much. I think this applause can express much more than words. Now, you have passionately described the daily life of people who work there, people who are at the same time soldiers performing their duties, and people sharing feelings with others. And I would like to stress a couple of aspects in your presentation. First, not so much the relationship with Afghanistan, but the relationship with Italians. When you say, as I come back to Italy and people listen to my story, finally I understand my role there. And I think this is a key point, because very often we talk about the missions with titles, mission in Afghanistan, but behind that there is the personal story of thousands of soldiers, of people living their own lives. Because when you read the book about a journalist, written by a journalist who was there, you often hear you often read about the story of a single person, but when you read the book written by a soldier, actually you are reading about the experience which is shared by thousands of people. And this is the key element which we at home are not able to see. And then Mr. Amato also talked about the Italian method, the Italian way of being a soldier, which characterizes us. Now, as I was in Afghanistan in 2009, now the Marines were conquering back land at the border with Pakistan, and as I talked with General McChrystal, now General McChrystal was asked to build in few weeks, to elaborate in few weeks a sort of doctrine on how to operate in that theater. And after a long explanation, after the long explanation he gave me about his doctrine, he listed a number of things: being soldiers, bringing back order here, understanding people, understanding the codes, the rules governing the country. And in the end I told him, well, this is basically the Italian method, the Italian way of doing things. And he said, yeah, exactly. This is the Italian way of doing things. So you see that even abroad they recognize the Italian way of things. And behind that there is the personal experience of a lot of soldiers. As I was in the States, I saw the respect with which soldiers are treated, especially the ones who had to bear with the consequences, heavy consequences, changes in their lives after being involved in peace missions. And this leads me to introduce the next speaker, Monica Contrafatto, Corporal Monica Contrafatto, who went to Afghanistan as a volunteer. She wanted to go there, and on the 24th of March 2012 he was in a very distant area, in a mountainous area. However, this is a key area for the opium trafficking, and the fact that our soldiers were there clearly bothered the Taliban and opium trafficking, and she was a victim of a very serious attack, and yet she keeps on saying that Afghanistan is a wonderful place and that she is happy of having been there.
Tutti. Io non sono una brava relatrice, non ho mai partecipato a un meeting, figuriamoci a quello.
Good morning, thank you very much. Obviously, I'm not a professional speaker. It's more or less the first time that I speak in public. As I said, I'm not a good, I mean, by far not as good as any of the other speakers, and I'm also very, very nervous. I'm shaking, actually. I get so emotional when I have to speak in public. And I have a message in writing, because I mean I couldn't possibly speak off the cuff. I need to read, because otherwise emotions would be overwhelming. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to those who wanted me to come here. It's a great experience. So my name is Contrafatto, 32 years old. I'm a corporal. I come from Sicily, which I used to define as the Afghanistan of Italy. I say jokingly, of course. Don't take me too seriously, especially my fellow citizens. I come from a town called Gela. I got my degree in 2006, and I've always been in love with the army ever since I was a child. And I've always known that my destiny was to become a soldier, was to join the army. I've had this dream ever since. I will be at the service of my homeland, serving in the army, just as a background. Now, I've been in service for 7 years only. I took part in 2 missions abroad in Afghanistan, once for 1 month, and a second time, unfortunately, I suffered a serious accident. 2009, my mission to Afghanistan, my first mission was in 2009. I went to Shinbad, and then after all the preparations, we eventually set out for that unknown place. I had read a lot about it, and people had told me about I need to be there to see what it looked like, and I was extremely happy. Eventually I had the possibility to put into practice what I had learned and to see my dream come true, seeing a new reality and helping a people that had been unknown to me until then get in contact with poverty, with famine, with hunger. I'm sorry, I'm speaking in a very disorderly, unorderly way, because I'm too nervous, too anxious. Please, apologies, my apologies. I wanted to be there and help a people that had been destroyed to some extent by war and hunger. And it's difficult to find words to describe my feelings and emotion. I've been watching the video a few moments ago, and I know that part of my heart remained in Kurdistan. I think I would be much happier there now, instead of being here in front of you talking to an audience which I find extremely embarrassing. Anyway, I find it difficult to find the right words to describe my experience, but I have so many nice memories. For instance, the first moment that I disembarked my plane and I saw like a sea of sand and mountains, and I thought to myself, it's not possible, it's impossible. I thought that everything that had been described to me, I saw that it did exist in reality. And then my first night was really amazing to me. I was staring at the sky, and the sky looked like fiction. I had the impression of being in contact with the stars and the moon. And then when we were in service at dawn, the first I could hear the locals singing their morning prayer, and again, extremely touching, emotional. So I remember that at the beginning I was very scared, but also I was longing to know new things. I didn't really realize where I was, so I got in contact with a new world, a new people, so many new things, and also I noticed that the people there wanted to know us. Thanks to my first mission, I fell in love with that place. This is absolutely true. I definitely fell in love, and I was yearning to go back there. I was in love with the eyes of the children, of what they were able to do with a piece of stone, what they could do by clashing two stones once against the other. They could do strange things, and I thought, well, I'm much better at video games. And then I remember our humanitarian aid. I remember that we took clothing there and healthcare, and I remember the eyes of the people, of the children, their gratitude, how thankful they were. It really touched my heart, and I'm not even speaking proper Italian, I'm sorry, too nervous. Anyway, after 6 months I had to come back to Italy, and then after a period of training I went back to Ebulistan, which is the location that you saw a while ago on the video. And there I felt extremely happy. Obviously, you know to some extent that anything might happen, but once you're there, you're so happy and you do not necessarily think about it. You do what you're supposed to do. Possibly those that are in Italy waiting for you are more scared, more they fear that something might happen to you, but you are there to give something, to help future generation to have something more, to have a better future. And indeed we've been able to build bridges, wells and schools, and people there helped us very much to avert attacks by the Taliban. So I think the vast majority of the population is on our side and not against us. So after 1 month I had to come back because we suffered an attack. One of my colleagues died, another colleague severely injured, and myself, I unfortunately I lost a leg. I mean, I had to have one leg amputated, but they didn't take away from me my passion, my interest. When I was there, we were living in tents, and I enjoyed very much sleeping in tents instead of a hotel, because I had this huge rewarding feeling of being helpful, being useful, and now I wanted to convey my experience to you. I really wanted to be a true military, a frontline military, and I know that deep inside myself I am a true military, and I hope one day I'll be able to go back to do what I've always done. Now I don't know whether there was just a mixture of words, but I hope I've conveyed a meaning. I hope that I've been able to make myself understood somehow.
Sto parlando col cuore, non sto parlando con...
So I'm talking to you from the bottom of my heart and not from my head, and I hope you don't find that what I'm saying is boring. I'm in such a distress, but what I want to tell you, I would be more than ready to go back to Afghanistan. I think these are extremely enriching and rewarding experiences. It's not easy being there. There is a complete lack of comfort, as you can imagine. A lot of dust, and in my latest mission in Wallistan, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have internet connection, or only, unfortunately, we had a very poor internet network. It was very difficult to be in touch with our family at home. Anyway, I didn't feel the need to call home very often. As I said, very rewarding. On the one hand, you understand that we are so lucky here in the West. We have so many things, but at the same time, what we have is nothing, because there they have very little, but the little that they have is possibly more than what we have. Our children in Italy, not necessarily every single child, but I know children here who have really everything. Their parents keep buying things for them, but not necessarily are they happy. Children there, maybe you give them a tiny bottle of water, a tiny snack, and you can see happiness and gratitude in their eyes. And that was really so rewarding for me, and that's the reason for them that I would be more than ready to go back immediately. So I'm not finding the right words to convey the right message and to explain what is really urging me to go back and to be there, but I can only tell you it's extremely tiring, but it's a matter of generosity, giving your heart to somebody who has nothing, and you get something in return. You get love and reward, and I can only hope that one day I'll be able to go back to that area. Apologies once again for my nervousness. Butterflies in my stomach. Please forgive me. No need to apologize, and I think that what you've just said has been extremely helpful for all of us. It's a great gift that you've given to all of us, because I mean, we've visited that place through your eyes, through your words, through your tale, and you shared with us your experience, and we all felt there, and it was obviously a very different perspective, yours, a very personal one. Thank you very, very much. Now, General Portolano, thank you very much. You went to Afghanistan, and prior to that you went to Iraq and many other places. Now, maybe we have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. The military forces are there with a very precise target, task, and they have to work in compliance with rules and frameworks and many things that we've just talked about. Thank you very much, Monica Maggioni. Thank you very much, the entire organization of the Rimini meeting, and Minister Mauro, for giving me the opportunity to take place in this very important event at the Rimini meeting. I am not a professional speaker as well. I'm only used to speak to soldiers, but once again, great honor, great privilege being here, and I know that the Rimini meeting, as usual, is an outstanding event. May I talk to you briefly about my experience in Afghanistan, and not only in Afghanistan but also in many other military operations that I took part in, quite a few actually, and may I thank very warmly Monica Contrafatto. Monica Contrafatto is someone that I like very much, somebody that I feel for, because she was the victim of an attack against Italian forces, and at that time when she suffered that attack, I was the commander-in-chief of the Italian forces in that area, in the western part, so I've experienced with great suffering actually the tragic event that hit Monica and the other Italian officer that unfortunately died, and the other one who is still admitted at the military hospital in Rome. And may I thank from here all the soldiers, every single member of the military staff that went with myself to the Balkans, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Macedonia, Kosovo, the first Iraqi war where I met Monica Maggioni for the first time, and now Afghanistan again. Every members of the military staff, every members of the marine forces, because I had the entire Reggimento San Marco of the Italian Marina with me, and it's been a great pleasure and a privilege working with all of them, these people wearing uniforms and belonging to the various Italian armed forces. My recent experience in Afghanistan has been quite a daunting mission, actually, extremely demanding, but I attempted to contribute to the reconstruction of a country and a people that will soon be given stability and safety. I had read about Afghanistan in my textbooks, elementary school, secondary school, and so I had tried to understand that country. And nowadays, although the moment is difficult, Afghanistan is a place of encounter, a place of encouragement between the Italian military forces and the other forces of the coalition. As I said a while ago, I also guided a multinational international contingent. I've been in contact with the Afghani institutions and powers. I said a place of encounter in the so-called comprehensive approach during peacekeeping operations. It's a global approach with the representatives both wearing uniforms and not wearing uniforms, including all the NGOs that cooperated with us to guarantee the proper socio-economic development of that country, but especially the encounter with the people of Afghanistan that we've all learned to respect, working shona to shona, I mean one next to the other. And the Afghani people have always been ready to cooperate with us and to be next to us. In Afghanistan, here I'm speaking both as a human person and as a soldier, there are things, both as a soldier and as a human person, I am very much attached to Afghanistan. Also because 53 Italian soldiers 53 Italian soldiers died in Afghanistan. We lost 53. So I'd like to pay tribute to these 53, but also the several injured or severely injured, including Monica. Young men and young women who in some cases paid a huge sacrifice, including sometimes their life, in performing their services. I would like to pay tribute to all of them. As I said, human person and soldier. In my own personal experience as a soldier in Afghanistan, I've been confronted with several daunting situations, extremely complex in some instances. I've had to come up with solutions or taking immediate decisions to come up with and find a solution to several different situations, not only war situation. I remember the first contact with the security forces in Afghanistan against those who have always been defined the enemies of peace and stability, against those that the same Afghani population would call the enemies of the Afghanistan people. And we needed to restart that reconstruction and bring about that social economic development in that country, and especially in the area where the Italian contingent had been assigned and for which we were responsible, the western part. Now, in warfare in an area of conflict or critical conflict, inevitably a different aspect emerges. It's like an inner force. The soldiers are able to find what their inner forces, their new forms of energies that they, and I found this force inside myself, and I identified with my own faith. Faith for all those who every single day contribute with a small step, with a small something. You know that you are there to help those people, to guarantee safety and security, knowing that safety and security are prerequisites for the taking place of all the other activities in a critical area. The human side of any soldier and of any military leader has always spurred me to try and establish good relationship with the people, the local populations, in an attempt to learn from them. And this is not just my approach. It is in line with the so-called Italian way. It's an approach that has to do with our training, our education, our Italian nature of our soldiers, of our carabinieri, of all the different military forces that are currently involved in military operations. In Afghanistan and in all the other military operations that we are involved in, a lot has been done to establish a good dialogue which is of the essence to guarantee that in peacekeeping operations stability is established for a society in which everybody can respect each other's freedom and liberty, and in an effort to decrease discriminations and promote diversity. Although it must be said that in that part of the world extremisms, terrorism, fanatisms prevail, and this approach has not always been easy. With reference to my own personal experience, the colleague was saying that each and every one of us should tell something about our own personal experience. Well, in this connection, I have to tell you that I find it very difficult to talk about them. First of all, because of my own nature, I'm very much reserved, and also I find it very difficult to find the right words to describe my personal encounters with the people of that area. And with reference to Afghanistan, the contact with the Pashtun, the Azeki, the Turkmeni, etc., regardless whether they were representatives of the safety forces of the governments, whether they were religious leaders. And thanks to dialogue, we've been able to solve huge problems that had to do with the inhumane attitude of people who were not members of the armed forces, that were not belonging to a state, people that had offended the symbols of the Islamic religion. But also relationship with farmers, old people, young people, students. For many of those had the opportunity to have access to some form of education, to some form of schooling. And I also remember the despair, the helplessness of those people who had experienced so many years of war, they had experienced so much poverty and misery and disease, but in spite of all that, they never gave up, and they were more than determined to continue to struggle and fight. And also the faces of the old people that I met in Herat, Farah, Chacharan. I visited the many villages nestled among the mountains and the valleys, from Murbak to the Zircon Valley, from Kekesafit to Bakwa in Bulistan. Several different encounters that wanted to promote the mutual knowledge, but also the primary needs. And once those primary needs were met, an effort to do something practical to help the local population, as Monica was pointing out, to maybe a very simple well to have water, a bridge to connect two towns, a road, a sewage network, anything can contribute to the well-being. And then more complex infrastructure for healthcare, for agriculture. Simply think that helping these people to water their fields or to build a well can greatly benefit the local population. And also I have to admit that for several people on the spot, not all of them enjoyed or were happy about our presence. Some people are not happy about it, are not happy even today, but the dialogue whose aim was to make them understand that our activities want to be of help to improve safety, stability and prosperity for the future, and the complete respect of the distinctive features of these people in cultural and religious terms, in conjunction with an effort to meet their needs very concretely. All of this gave these people a ray of hope and made them hope in a better future. I can make an example on that. Nobody would even dream of telling the Italian soldiers, international soldiers, that along a specific pathway or road explosive material had been placed. After the improvement of the dialogue, very often we would receive like tip-offs from these people in the villages telling us that along a specific road an explosive material, threatening material had been placed. So the local population was absolutely on our side. So it was not a matter of winning the hearts and minds. They wanted to conquer the hearts and minds, but receiving the spontaneous support of the local population. I would like to say that thanks to the Italian approach, that's exactly what we have achieved. But there's more to Afghanistan. Obviously, people have experienced extreme difficulties, extreme poverty. But as I said, there's another Afghanistan, the other side of the coin, the other form of life in Afghanistan. The colleague Amato and Monica Contrafatto already made reference to that. The faces of the so many children. I've met so many children. Their faces are always stained with mud, but nevertheless faces full of emotions. And I would like to share with you a short experience that I experienced when I visited the local Italian hospital, when I was visiting our injured military forces and the Afghani civilians that were admitted to that hospital. It was shortly before Christmas. I remember I met a young Italian child, maybe 10 years old. He was lying on a stretcher, looked very sad. His face was very sad, at least. So I went up to him and caressed him. That child opened his eyes and smiled to me. A beautiful smile that I will never forget. I couldn't possibly find better words to define it. And in that smile, on the faces of those children, on the face of a small Afghanistan girl, Nazifa, who is currently in Italian to receive medical treatment, representatives of an NGO that are active in Afghanistan, and I think that on the faces of those children, I've seen a new future. Our children are our future. I think that our children and their children will meet with each other one day. Not only Afghanistan, all the areas of crisis, they will meet either as friends or as foes. I think what happens tomorrow will depend on what we are doing today in positive terms to contribute to peace, stability and international prosperity. So taking into account all the experience that I took part in, both in Italy and abroad, my message in conclusion is that by participating in international missions, we Italian soldiers, men and women, are serving peace, contributing to peace and stability internationally, and we are more than aware that our commitment in missions agreed upon by the United Nations and the governments are aimed at re-establishing peace and prosperity and good quality of life for all human persons. We are also fully aware that by participating in these international missions, we are contributing to the protection of our beautiful country and our beautiful continent. And we contribute in general to the safety and security of Italy and Europe, which is very much exposed to areas of crisis and instabilities in places that can be either a few kilometers away, like Libya, can be in the center of Europe, like in the Balkans, or thousands of kilometers away, like Lebanon, Afghanistan, Somalia, Mali. We're active in these places, working hard to re-establish peace and development for those countries in cooperation with our European and international partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. General. Thank you, Mr. General. Thanks to all of you. So General Portolano has introduced some topics which are worth being discussed, that is the role of missions, how they are performed, and it is with you that I would like to analyze the situation. Now, Minister Mauro, missions abroad are also an expression of the degree of modernity of an army, which this is the main activity of our army now. So, in what sense is it important for peace missions to continue to exist? I mean, sometimes people say we should abandon these peace missions, but why are they important? Good morning, everybody. First of all, before replying to the question, I would like to sincerely thank, in my capacity of minister, the organizers of the meeting of Rimini, because when the organizers accepted to have such a meeting, well, they were faced with the bet, that is the bet of trying to help cancel some of the, eliminate some of the cliches concerning peace missions abroad. Now, this is not propaganda. What we're doing here is not propaganda, but we are here to provide information about facts that are decisive for our fate, and that is why I would like to thank the organizers of the meeting, because they have never acted on behalf of a political force, but they have always promoted dialogue in such a way to promote the truth and the emergence of truth. And I am fully convinced of what I'm saying. Today, on the media, news, information is always altered, adapted in order to follow reasons of power, political forces, etc. Whereas the meeting promotes truth, promotes dialogue in order to find out about the truth. And a way to do so is to look at the world, analyze what is going on around the world, tragic facts around the world, and to try to find an answer, a neutral answer and try to raise public awareness. And this is a way to avoid propaganda. It's a way to avoid facts being mystified by the media or by partisan forces. And this is an approach through which ideologists or political forces change the way that the actual situation and present it in a partisan way. Now, I would like to talk about Giuseppe La Rosa, Major Brigadier of the Brigata Sassari, who was one of the last soldiers of the Italian army who died in mission. The second time I went to Herat in Afghanistan to meet our forces there, I felt the need to tell them the following. I didn't want to hide them the most important thing, that is, there is nothing which is as important, as precious as the life of an individual, and so no strategy, no political strategy can replace or the life of a human being. So I asked them, why are we here? Because this is actually the question we are asked everywhere in Italy. However, this can be a tricky question if you don't really analyze the situation, if you don't really know what the situation is like there. Now, of course, the life of a human being is priceless, but what pushes a human being to sacrifice his, her own life for something, for a value? So, how can we assess the importance of a mission which has been described by the previous speakers? And this is the question which I would like to address to you. And this is a question concerning Lebanon, Afghanistan, Bosnia, and I don't want you to accept my reply, but you have to find your own reply. Now, one of the objections I often hear is democracy is not for Afghans, it's not for Muslim peoples. It is something which cannot be understood by peoples who have different traditions. On the 11th of August of 2003, the ISAF mission began with the involvement of the Italian Army, Navy, and Air Force. 10 years later, and 20 years after the beginning of the mission in Bosnia, in the heart of Europe, I can say that we have improved since 1993, when we didn't do anything to prevent the massacre of Srebrenica to occur. We've been for 15 years in Kosovo. We've been for 34 years since the beginning of the meeting of Rimini in Lebanon. We have never been to Rwanda, and the fact of never being there led to the massacre of 800,000 people in 54 days, not by the army, by the Air Force, by the F-35, but these people were killed with machetes, and this is because we didn't accept that hundreds of thousands of French soldiers could get there and stop the violence, the so-called interposition. Now, I was born in a small village in the south, and in the streets of this village I learned that you always need someone to intervene when something occurs. You need someone who feels a sense of responsibility to intervene and to prevent something tragic from happening. So you have to intervene, to get involved in order to create the conditions necessary for peace. So in order to do that, you need to feel a sense of responsibility and to do what is called in technical terms interposition, intervening. And this is the only way we can prevent tragic events from occurring. Now, in our constitution there is a principle which is enshrined, which states that we want to prevent war. So we are not embracing our weapons to conquer a country, but to build the conditions necessary for peace. And peace comes at a price. Peace, democracy come at a price. Now, if you go in front of the White House, there is a monument dedicated, paying tribute to one of the first missions which was celebrated a few months ago, the mission in Korea, and on that monument you find the following sentence: freedom is not for free. So it comes at a price, and there is someone who has to pay that price, and these are the people who are sitting next to me. Now, let's not be rhetorical. I mean, is it worth being in Afghanistan, having our soldiers in Afghanistan? Now, I've been a European parliamentarian since 1999, and the first time I went to Afghanistan, the country was ruled by the Taliban, and at that time prisoners, now the government was cutting heads in the stadium. At the time, only male boys could go to school. In 2003 there were 800,000 students in Afghanistan. All of them were boys. Today there are 1.5 million students, a good portion of which are girls, and also at the university level we now have women. 120 hospitals were built since the beginning of the Eyes of Mission. Before the Eyes of Mission, no more than 30% of the Afghan population had access to hospital care. Today it's 80%. We built hundreds, thousands of kilometers of roads. We built firms, companies. We built institutions. We promoted a culture of dialogue in order to promote the construction of democracy. That is why we are in Afghanistan. And that is why it is not rhetorical to say that this was only possible thanks to the security conditions created through the involvement of our forces. So it is only through the construction of the necessary security conditions that we can have a flourishing democracy, a growing economy, the situation of economic growth and prosperity which we have here in Italy. So why should we deprive Afghanistan of these conditions, and Syria, Lebanon as well? So we feel we are called to this duty. We have a sense of responsibility towards these people. We are one of the most important democracies in the world. We are one of the richest countries in the world, and so It is our task to share with other peoples what we have built together, the prosperity we have in our country. This is our duty. This is what we need to do around the world, and which we are called to do following the so-called Italian way. Now, General Amato was very precise. Now, what is the Italian way, the Italian method? It is a method of sharing feelings with people based on Christian values, of recognizing others as our brothers and sisters. This is what has changed our view of military interventions. They are no longer war missions. I am the Minister of Defense, and so I need to defend the conditions necessary for people to survive and to prosper. And when we launch one of the interposition missions, when we intervene, clearly you need to have the right forces in place. You need to have the muscles, so to say. You need to be strong enough in order to be able to perform the task which was given to us by history. That is why we go to Afghanistan with weapons. It is not because we want to show off our power, but it is in the interests of our own country. That is, we need to share the difficulties we have and try to do our best in order to help others have a chance, have an opportunity. It is this approach which leads us to be involved in 23 countries, in 36 missions around the world. Now, we have heard about Afghanistan. We have also mentioned Lebanon. Now, when I went there to meet the Sunni, the Shiite leaders and the leaders of 8 Christian denominations who make up the miracle of Lebanon, I could perceive they have very good common sense, but I also heard their invitation, their not to abandon Lebanon, and they also told me they were tired, they were fed up with hearing the name of God being used for their own interests, for partisan interests. This is what is happening in Lebanon, but it is also happening in Syria, in Egypt. This is something we need to understand. If we don't intervene, we will allow rich, important countries to be destroyed, and we will let civil society die in those countries. So we must understand that there is a lot at stake in these countries, and that we need to intervene in order to avoid chaos. So we cannot ignore what is happening in these countries, because we can only build democracy by feeling involved, by feeling close to these peoples, and by living up to our tradition as a country which works for the good of our people, but also for the good of other peoples. Now, this is at the core of the meeting today. Today we are talking about security and education in peace missions. Why do we use the term education? Because everything that human beings are doing is important. Now, we are living at a time of emergency, as the title of the meeting says, and we can only overcome a situation of emergency if we are involved directly with the people. Now I am I became a minister and I gave my oath when two people, one of them was killed and the other was severely injured by a fool who wanted to attack the institutions. And since that day, I've always asked myself, what can I learn from that sacrifice? What should Italian politicians do? They should follow the example of these two policemen who were injured during that attack and learn to serve our country, to feel the responsibility of serving the country and giving back dignity to politics. So we should turn to figures such as Giuseppe La Rosa, the soldier who was in the armored vehicle and who realized that when the bomb entered the vehicle, decided to protect the bomb, so to say, he decided to protect his comrades, to save his comrades at the cost of his own life. So I believe that when people see the army as something rhetorical, they actually don't understand the very best aspects of our democracy. And we should not also have a caricatural view of school and hospitals as places which do not work, because this is something which makes us lose sense of merits, because we need to look at things objectively and to evaluate things with an objective point of view. So we need to recognize what is good and what is bad. Now, the Catholic Church has proclaimed as saints 131 soldiers, people who were in the army, in the navy. 131 of them were proclaimed saints. So if it is reasonable for the church to proclaim as saint someone who carried a weapon, well, this means that we are all human beings. We are all the same when we curse, when we kill, when we save others. This is the mysterious nature of human beings, and this is what transpires from the experiences of our friends. Now, 10 years ago, there was also the massacre of Nasiriyah, where 19 of our soldiers were killed. Now, the Carabinieri, most of them were Carabinieri. There were also some journalists, and they lost their lives for truth. And so that is why I believe it is very fitting for the meeting of Rimini to remember the figure of Andreotti and his involvement in the construction of Europe, because a politician during his life can also fight to meet the needs of human beings. And so when we try to build through special missions such as the one in Afghanistan, or when we are involved in these missions in order to promote democracy, security, but also when we are involved in our own daily lives, we need to feel the responsibility of promoting the truth. And this is the only way to find an answer to that question. Yes, it is worth being in Afghanistan.
Mai domanda ebbe risposta più
Now, you gave a very clear answer to the question. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.